I was unfortunate enough to encounter this post on a certain subreddit titled, "Am I betraying my leftist ideals if I become a cop?" So I'll read this out. Me and my friends got into an argument as to whether me joining the local sheriff's department would be a betrayal of my leftist values and ideals, and that I'm a hypocrite. I am very anti-cop and want more regulation, training, and accountability. Then you're not actually anti-cop, buddy. You are just like for the police right there. You're not actually anti-cop. You're just like, I want the police to be, slightly less bad. Anyway, but I don't see the issue in me filling the spot that some right-winger could take. I at least have de-escalation training, and wouldn't it be better to try and change the current environment than just completely ignore it? 92% upvoted, 182 upvotes. Some would say that this is a highly left-wing community, but I'm kind of doubting it with posts like this there. And with the replies, I am sort of doubting it even more. 319 upvotes, by the way. No, we need more leftists in places of power. As long as we have the police, I'd rather have leftist officers than fascist ones. That's my thinking, replies the original poster. Their arguments were I was supporting a system of inequity and fulfilling their agenda, when honestly I'd be pushing my own leftist agenda. Hopefully, changing the environment around me for the better. And the other guy responds saying, do they also think having a job is supporting the bourgeois? Their thinking is not great. But yeah, do what you want and good luck. And the OP, of course, replies, they're unemployed and never held a job. Because I guess if you think you shouldn't become a cop, it means you're unemployed and never held a job. I could kind of excuse this sort of thinking if we were dealing with people who just learned that there's a political ideology aside from neoliberalism or conservatism yesterday. Right? Like brand new people with no idea what's going on. But you have here people who are very, very confident in what they're saying. Like this person came here not to actually ask a question. They came here because they were relatively confident they were going to get replies reaffirming what they already believed. And that's exactly what they got. Highly upvoted posts here. Basically a bunch of highly upvoted posts all reaffirming that, go become a cop. It's not a big deal. Become a cop. It's all great. There was even one saying if I'm sent in a concentration camp, I'd much rather the guard be a progressive and guarding me, at least to give me a chance of escaping. It's a job like any other. We even have someone saying, we need more leftist concentration camp guards. This is very bad. Everyone here is incredibly, abominably, completely wrong, and I guess it needs to be explained why, though I don't think I'll get to these people because, I don't think they're coming at this from a position where they actually care. I think they're coming at from a position where they just want to try and justify the status quo and existing systems and being an integral part of them, just in a way that sounds sort of leftist, that is sort of aesthetically leftist. So this isn't so much for them, but I will nonetheless explain the complete idiocy involved in this thought, okay? So the fundamental classes, two fundamental classes in the society, in pretty much every society in the world right now, no matter where you live, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie is fundamentally the class of people that makes money by doing nothing or very little. They make money by owning things or by, investing in things, which is technically part ownership anyway, stuff like that. And then there is another class, which is fundamentally the people who work for those people. So people who, for example, earn wages or, independent workers who don't employ other people, who, might charge by the hour or something, but who might not necessarily be working directly for one person on a permanent, or for one company on a permanent basis, for example. There is, of course, a spectrum between these two sometimes. There can be nuances, but fundamentally, 99% of people fall into one of these two categories in some way, shape, or form. So to be a bourgeois, you need to exploit. You cannot be a bourgeois without exploiting proletariat. It's just fundamentally a part of the relation. You make your money off other people working for you, doing things for you, and you profit off that. That's how you survive, okay? But this is very key here. When you are a bourgeois or someone else is a bourgeois or whatever, you're not someone who's born innately evil. You weren't born a bourgeois. It's a status that you happen to be in the society that you're in for whatever reason, Maybe you made your own company. Maybe you were born with a dad who owned a factory or something. Now you do exploit people, and of course you are personally responsible for that, but you're doing it in the selfish pursuit of your own interests because you want to make more money for yourself. You want to get as much profit for yourself as possible. You want to keep expanding the size of your company. You want to buy more companies or whatever, because that is fundamentally what is within your interests. You can try to be a good bourgeois all you want. Doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, your interests are going to be tied to your class position. You're largely going to be pursuing those interests regardless of how much you think you aren't, or regardless of how much you obfuscate it. And then you have, for example, working class people who are fundamentally in a very similar position in terms of their selfish interests. A worker, wants to make more money, wants to better his situation, whatever, though obviously their situation is infinitely more precarious, and that is what leads them into having to work for the bourgeois to survive. So we have classes who are fundamentally both pursuing their own interests, though obviously one of them relies on exploiting people to maintain their class position and the other doesn't. They're not like morally better than one another, like on a base level, basically. They are obviously, to be a proletariat, you're hurting basically no one most of the time. Whereas to be a bourgeois, you literally cannot be one without hurting people. So both of these classes might be pursuing their own selfish interests, but in doing so, one of them is hurting people and the other isn't. Ergo, you can make a sort of moral condemnation of the bourgeois if you want to. Now, let's add something else into this equation. Soldiers, police. Now, soldiers, police, etc., they don't produce value themselves. They don't make things. Rather, their role is sort of to indirectly help the bourgeoisie through being their enforcers. The enforcers of their property rights, the enforcers of laws that they create indirectly or directly to protect their own interest, to protect the status quo, which benefits them, which keeps capital concentrated in their hands, which keeps this sort of class relation between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie going for their own benefits. They can keep pursuing their selfish interests as well as possible. Now, if you are, for example, a police officer in that position, whose interest do you think your self-interest is tied to? The working class or the bourgeoisie? Your job is literally to enforce norms and
there's no room. They can't
regulations, whatever, that fundamentally at their core exists to protect the bourgeoisie as a member of an institution founded for that explicit purpose. Who do you think your self-interest is going to align with? Doesn't matter how good you think you are on a morally individual level. You can't be a leftist cop. If you're a leftist cop, you wouldn't join the police force because, the job exists to do things for the bourgeoisie. The job exists to protect their interests. So not only if you join the police, will you very, very quickly align your own self-interest with theirs, you're also not going to be able to change anything.
Communism is based.
Regardless of how much you think you can, because for one, you are an individual. You're an individual police officer. You're not a politician. You're not making policy. For two, you're literally directly violently enforcing the monopoly of violence that is held by the bourgeois class in practically every state in existence today. So while a politician, doesn't
Communism
necessarily, though they can, have to be like an enforcer of these relations, you unambiguously are. So how the fuck does this work, right? How does the logic they have work? You're going to join, you're going to maintain your individual moral purity. You're not aligning your interests with the state. You're not getting your paycheck from the bourgeoisie directly in order to do their dirty work. No, you are. Obviously you are. The answer to all these questions is yes, you are. And these people here have for example, one of them said, it's like having any other job, for example. Well, no, it's not. Not even remotely. There is a fundamental conflict always between workers and owners. There is a fundamental conflict. The workers' interests are in a direct conflict with the interests of the bourgeoisie. The workers are always trying to push for as much as they can get from the bourgeoisie. They are always in conflict. A McDonald's worker, doesn't matter what we're talking about, some guy at a cash register, whatever. They are fundamentally in conflict with their employers at all times, regardless of even if they don't even know it, regardless of how much the bourgeoisie tries to obfuscate this, tries to make them forget it. They are fundamentally in conflict. They always want more pay. They always want to work less. They always want, as a class, to, have more rights, whatever. The police officer is not, okay? The police officer's interests are fundamentally completely aligned with those of the bourgeois class. Cops are paid exorbitant amounts of money for the complete lack of any sort of formation that is needed to get the job. And the reason for that is because what they do is specifically incredibly valuable to maintaining the dominance of the bourgeoisie over society, over economies, over the lives of the working class. There is no conflict between the bourgeois and police officers. There is, however, conflict between the working class and police officers. The police officers exist to essentially go and beat the fucking shit out of workers. They are bribed and they profit from enforcing the will of the bourgeois on workers. Now, I don't understand where these people get the idea that by somehow willingly, voluntarily taking that job, you are furthering leftist principles, because it's just a complete lack of systemic material relations. It's a complete lack of, the things that motivate people in different class positions. Because everyone in every class position is motivated by what is best for them. That is why the bourgeoisie are so good at acting together as a class, because they recognize their class position, and why relatively working class people tend to be less good at organizing, because the bourgeoisie control infinitely more power than they do. So they're able to propagandize to the working class and mislead them to very often advocate against their own interests. There's also the fact that, right, the McDonald's worker, he's making fucking burgers, okay? He's making burgers, giving people fucking cheeseburgers, okay? He's working a job that produces some sort of value being whether we're talking pure like monetary value or that has actual like utility for people or whatever. The cop is not only not doing that, but their job is quite literally to enforce the will of the bourgeoisie on other workers using the threat of or actual violence. That is the detail of their job. That is what it is. They're not just making a fucking cheeseburger. They're directly exercising violence on people in order to enforce the will of the bourgeoisie. This is not the same thing as going to work every day and just doing a normal job. It's not a normal job. The same goes for soldiers. And these people, like, I'll show you, they said, if anyone thinks it's wrong for a leftist to be a police officer, they must logically also not want any leftists as politicians. That makes literally no sense. Politicians are not, like, by default, the violent enforcers of state power. They are not in a job that solely exists to violently enforce state power. You can be a politician and literally never once ever vote yes on anything that harms another human being. It is completely possible. Even in the systems that we have now. Have a politician who only votes yes on things that like unambiguously help people. That is completely possible. You're not going around with a fucking baton hitting people in the name of enforcing the hegemony of the bourgeoisie, okay? Managers. In many respects, yeah, you shouldn't be a manager. You should probably not be a manager. That is true. That is actually functionally true. You're essentially turning yourself into an enforcer for your boss. Still nowhere near on the same level as being a cop, okay? Not even remotely. You essentially turn yourself into like a cop, of an individual workplace, okay? You're not literally going out and hitting people with a fucking baton, threatening people with a fucking gun yourself, or implicitly or actually doing so. At least at the end of the day, a manager is actually overseeing some sort of productive operation that theoretically might produce value for human beings. They don't literally solely exist to be the violent enforcer of state power. Leftists shouldn't be CEOs. Yeah, they shouldn't. Unambiguously, you shouldn't be a CEO. Like, you need to be told this. Are you fucking kidding me? Soldiers, yeah. No, you shouldn't be a soldier. Are you kidding me? Soldiers are worse cops. I mean, there is definitely some ambiguity here, obviously. For example, most countries do literally nothing with their military. They basically exist for show. So in most countries, yeah, you can probably be a soldier without being like in the moral wrong or the material wrong. Though in many countries you cannot. The USA, for example, Russia, for example, Israel, for example, those countries you absolutely cannot be a good soldier or anything like that. It's absolutely completely obviously immoral to be a soldier, because your job in those armies and in many other armies, it's to be a cop, but in other countries, and even more violently against people you have even less of a right to exercise any sort of violent power over. So you're even worse than the vast majority of cops when you're a soldier, obviously. Priests, I have no idea how priests are in here. Priests, by default, do not actually exercise any power over people at all. They could exercise institutional power, for example, as part of like the Catholic Church, but by default, being a priest doesn't necessarily mean like you are exercising any sort of power, really, though it does trend in that sort of way. But like, I have no idea how this is in here. It's like one of these things is not like the others. Like, you can't even talk about this in the same terms as others. Investors, I mean, an investor is just an owner. An investor is someone who is a part owner in many different companies. So yeah, an investor, by large, like any significant level, is a bourgeois. No doubt about it. Taxpayers, how is this in here? How is having to pay tax under the threat of violence, which is enforced, by the way, by those same police? They are the ones who enforce the threat of violence, which forces you to pay taxes. How is having to pay taxes, or like going to jail, or having your wealth appropriated from you, what little you've earned as a worker, by those cops, morally equal to being a cop and doing that sort of things to those people? This makes no sense at all. One of these things is completely voluntary. No one forced you to become a cop. You could easily get another job or just not fucking work. You know, if your choice is between having to take a job which is unambiguously in existence solely for the sake of you oppressing people on behalf of the bourgeoisie and sitting on your fucking ass unemployed, sit on your fucking ass and be unemployed. Look for any other job. Wait it out. Being a cop is voluntary. Just because you have a limited range of choice within capitalism doesn't mean you don't have choice that you are not ultimately somewhat responsible for in the end. If you take a choice which you are knowingly taking, you know, like being a cop, a job that only exists in order to harm working class people and benefit the owning class. Like, this is unambiguously, like, it's voluntary. No one is forced into being a cop. Tax paying is involuntary. You're not involuntarily forced into being a cop or a soldier or any of this shit. Give me a break. You can say, well, is it okay to become a hitman, to go and kill people for money? Because, well, capitalism, baby, I'm just making a living. No, obviously you wouldn't say that. Same fucking thing with being a cop, being a soldier, any of these jobs where your entire job description is to violently, you know, enforce the will of an oppressor class over oppressed people. Like, give me a fucking break. And he goes on to say, like, employers of any kind. No, I've already been over this with the McDonald's example. Give me a break, man. Consumers of any kind. How is buying a fucking Coca-Cola the same as voluntarily signing up for like $100,000 a year paycheck to go and hit people with a fucking baton in the name of the bourgeoisie? Are you joking here? Morally, there is no difference between being a hitman and being a cop or being a soldier. When you put it that way, it's really obvious. Hitmen are basically violent enforcers just of individuals or organizations rather than of a state apparatus, rather than of the bourgeoisie at large. So look, there are just two fundamental misunderstandings at play here, assuming good faith, which I don't think is involved here at all. Like, look, these people aren't coming from a position of so-called good faith. These are people who are fundamentally okay with the system and don't actually want to overthrow it. They don't want to change it or anything. Just trying to keep up like a sort of clubhouse sort of aesthetic leftism. They want to seem sort of cool, radical, different, hip and stuff, without actually like doing anything or even thinking in a way that is at all compatible with the image that they project. But here are the two fundamental misunderstandings at play here. One, there is this notion that they are like personally immune to pursuing their own self-interest. You know, they're gonna become a cop but do it well, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever because cops don't particularly decide what they do. Cops can exercise a very limited amount of discretion, but I mean, you're going to be sent to serve evictions. You're going to be sent to hit people in protests. You know, you're going to be sent to bus strikes. You know, you're going to be sent to like fucking do bad shit all the fucking time because that's what cops are for. And you know that. You absolutely know that. You know, and you're not going to be absolved from that because you let a kid with some marijuana off every now and again. Like, their idea here is essentially to maintain the system by becoming an integral part of it, by aligning their own interests with it. And they have this really fundamentally ridiculous notion that, well, better me who's going to let a kid off without a marijuana charge than some other guy who won't. And you can take this logic so far. We need more leftists in the Republican Party. We need more leftists in the Nazi Party. We need more leftists in the Waffen-SS. We need more leftist concentration camp guards. When does this fucking end? It doesn't end anyway because they haven't thought about it at all. They haven't thought about any of this. They don't have any sort of systemic understanding of anything. For one, you don't want to maintain these systems. By becoming a part of them, whether you're a slightly nicer part of them or not, you are working to maintain them. And for two, you don't have any capacity to change these as an individual. Like, you can say no. That's the only real action you can take. You can say, no, I'm not going to do that job. That is your option. You can say no, or you can become an integral part of whatever repressive apparatus, whatever abhorrent political party that you want to, throw out there. You can become a cop, you can become a soldier, you can become a Republican Party member, you can become a Nazi Party member, and you can do it nicely. But you can also just say no, you can just not become those things. So obviously, fundamentally, you are responsible if you don't say no. You're responsible if you join up voluntarily to any of these institutions. And even if you do somehow join up against your will, the only way to do that is like conscription or something, you can still say no. The Wehrmacht soldiers didn't have to fire their fucking machine guns into a bunch of Jewish people lined up in front of a mass grave, okay? They could have said no. Would they probably get in trouble for it? Would they maybe even be executed for it? Yep. Say no anyway. Now, your predicament as a potential cop is nowhere near that dire either. Your predicament as a potential cop is, I say no, I have to look for another job. You don't get executed. So you have no fucking excuse whatsoever. It's already not an excuse, and in this case, you have no excuse whatsoever. And yeah, you're not going to be a good cop anyway. You're fundamentally aligning your interests with what the point of the job is, which is to defend the bourgeois class. You have very little room to move, okay? You're not going to be able to say no when they send you to quell a riot. You can't say no when they send you to fucking do an eviction. You quit the job then. So you become a good cop if you actually do stick to your principles, if they're even remotely aligned with leftism. You'll quit literally on the spot. The first fucking call they try to send you out to, you'll quit before you even get there. So what the fuck are you doing? It's either your principles aren't leftist in any way, shape, or form, or you just don't join. There's also this idiotic idea that they seem to have where any and all personal responsibility can just be shrugged off with capitalism, baby. It's all no ethical consumption under capitalism, baby. There is a range of choice that people can take, and that they are ultimately responsible for taking choices like choosing to join the fucking police force to oppress your fellow workers in the name of bourgeois hegemony. You gotta be fucking kidding me. Just because your range of choice is limited doesn't mean you don't have choice. Like, yeah, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. That means like, when you go to a supermarket, you gotta buy the food that's there in order to survive. Because, what the fuck else are you gonna do? That's how our society works. You do not have to become a police officer to survive. You don't have to become a soldier to survive. You don't have to become a fucking CEO to survive. Okay? These are not the same thing. Buying a fucking vegetable that might have been picked by like an exploited informal migrant from Mexico is not the same fucking thing as becoming a police officer for $100,000 a year and going to fucking hit that Mexican migrant in the fucking head and deport him. These are not the same thing. And it's absolutely ludicrous that people cannot see that there is a range here. There is a range of disconnectedness from the exploitation. There is a range of directedness. And there is a range of interests at play here. Fundamentally, police operate against the interests of the working class, and they are paid handsomely for it. They are incentivized in every way, shape, or form to do so. And if they somehow don't do so, they're doing so anyway. Why would you become a cop in the first place? Otherwise, you have to quit immediately. As I said, if they somehow don't do so, they're getting fucking fired instantly. How do you think this works? What you're going to do? You're going to sign up to become a US military soldier and just say no when someone defending his own country against your illegal invasion shows up to fucking shoot you in the head for it? No, you're going to shoot him, and you're going to become a murderer for that because he was in the right to be there and you were in the wrong. There is obviously personal responsibility in this case. Even in cases where you are forced into it, like conscription, you can say no. You can go to jail for a year or two. It's better than going to kill babies. Just because we are against like neoliberal ideas that every single person is poor, has their lot in life and it's their own fault or whatever, doesn't mean that we cannot make certain choices. We don't have a range of choice, and that we should not make certain choices within this range of choice, because doing so means that we are maintaining the system that disadvantages working class people, and that is specifically set up to benefit and maintain this system for the benefit of the bourgeoisie. That's why it's like, can I be a leftist cop? This is a question that should never even cross your mind. It makes absolutely no sense. It is just so completely nonsensical. It's like, it's this mentality that a lot of these people tend to have, where it's really just fundamentally capitalist realism. I know that phrase is overused a lot, but in this case, it absolutely applies. They cannot imagine a better world. All that they can imagine is the current world that we have now, where cops are slightly nicer, where, maybe a cop will let someone off without charging them for having a little bit of marijuana, while also going to beat people up and evict them in their other 5 calls for the day. That's the best that they can imagine. If you're a leftist, your goal should be to dismantle these systems, these relations entirely. And I mean, even if that is, a difficult thing to like see progress towards in the short term, even if, this is something that takes a long time to work towards, to spur, it's no excuse for you becoming a cop in the interim. Because obviously, when that time does come, you're going to be the one on the other side. You're going to be the one stopping the revolution. You are a naive fucking idiot if you think otherwise, because your interests are aligned with your class position. And when you are a cop, you're in a class position that is not a worker. Your interests are fundamentally aligned with the bourgeoisie. So you're going to be beating them up. Your paycheck depends on it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. These people who call themselves leftists for some reason simply do not have any systemic understanding of everything. And it's very weird too, because they fundamentally treat everything in a very individualized way, a very neoliberal way, while also trying to absolve these individuals of any responsibility for their actions. So they'll say things like, it's wrong to call Israelis colonizers, even though they factually, materially are colonizers, because they were just born into that position. It's not their fault. So it's all about personal responsibility with them. I guess like if you're born owning a factory, it's not your fault, even though you're exploiting people, even though you're harming people, but in doing so. And you can, through this sort of magic, you can also literally become a cop or a soldier, become the violent enforcer of the interests of capital or whatever, smack workers in the head or whatever, and somehow it's not your fault, right? The personal responsibility does not exist in any way, shape, or form. You might have had a range of choice, however limited it may be, and you might have made this choice consciously yourself to put yourself into this position while completely conscious of it, by the way, because if you already say that you're a leftist, you don't have the excuse of, I was just ignorant. You don't have the excuse of, I was misled by propaganda. You are basically saying you're already past that point, yet you're still trying to find roundabout ways to justify yourself becoming a cop. At that point, any notion of, oops, I was just ignorant is out the window. You're doing it on purpose. So obviously you have personal responsibility for that. Fucking obviously. It's so insane how they just try to completely remove any notion of people making choices that hurt others being even possible. The only way that you could possibly join the police in a way that would make any sense at all is to become a cop and immediately sabotage the fucking police station on your first day at work and then run away before you even have to do anything to anyone. That's the only possible way. Join the military, and the second that you get out of boot camp, do a Minecraft in the barracks. That is the only possible way you could join these institutions and do anything good before you do anything that harms anyone else in any way. You basically join them with the intent to never actually do what you are supposed to do. But these people aren't talking about that, okay? They're talking about willingly becoming the armed enforcers of the interests of the bourgeoisie against the working class and profiting from it. And then being like, it's okay. You got to have a job. You got to make money somehow. Got to earn a living. It's not how this fucking works, man. It's not how it fucking works at all. And I just completely destroyed that notion right here. No, and Borsch said as much. Become a leftist cop, become a leftist soldier, become a leftist billionaire. As long as you yourself try to follow these ideals, you'll be an asset to other people with your views. It's so funny how they hate China so much, but fundamentally, their logic is the exact same as the average dengist. Market socialism. That is socialism with Chinese characteristics. Become a leftist cop. That is what dengists say about China. Become a leftist billionaire. That is what dengists say about China. Become a leftist soldier. That is what dengists say about China. It's so funny. They are just fucking American nationalists who hate China and Chinese people. They hate it when China does it, but fundamentally their logic is the same as a Chinese nationalist. It's so fucking funny. Or some Chinese person who calls themselves a Marxist trying to reconcile the system that they support with this sort of thing. It's unreal. Fundamentally, they're exactly the same. There's no difference. If your choice is to get executed or kill a bunch of Jewish people in the Holocaust, just get executed, man. Just die, okay? Please. This isn't a complicated moral question. There's a reason why we're still prosecuting concentration camp guards today. The excuse of, oops, I was forced into it doesn't work. At least liberals can get that right. Why can't you? Holy shit. They're still extraditing 95-year-old concentration camp guards who they find hiding out in fucking Brazil, who make that same argument. Oh, I didn't kill anyone myself. I was just a guard. Nope, doesn't fucking work. You had other options. You had choices that you could have made that didn't have to end in you being a guard at a fucking death camp. No excuse. Yeah, it's literally the just following orders excuse. It really is. It's literally just following orders. There's no difference between their arguments here and the just following orders excuse. It's unfucking believable. No one believes in that. But for some reason, if you want to be an American cop or an American soldier, these supposed leftists, they'll make any excuse possible. I'll never understand it, but it's because it's not logical. It's not coherent. It doesn't make any sense. It's people who are trying to keep up an aesthetic image, like a sort of image of themselves being in some sort of cool club where they role play as more progressive than other people, while also holding ideas that are completely contradictory to the image that they wish to project. And that is why they sort of mental gymnastic themselves into these sort of idiotic situations where they're like, just become a cop. You gotta make a living somehow. Just following orders, man. There's no logic to it, so there's no point really trying to understand the logic behind it. They're trying to fool themselves with roundabout, idiotic non-logic to justify this to themselves and to other people in their circle. They're not actually trying to make any sort of coherent argument or anything. So there's not really any point in trying to understand them because it doesn't make sense. They know it. These are my American leftists. We're fucked. In these comments as well, they try to say, oh, ACAB is a metaphor. All cops are bastard is a metaphor about the system. It's not actually calling all cops bastards. It literally is. It's not the institution of policing is bad. It's all cops are bad. It's explicitly extolling the literal fact that individually police are bastards because they are enforcing the will of the bourgeoisie and knowingly doing so and profiting from it. They are oppressing workers for their own material gain. No fucking shit, they're all bastards on an individual level, no matter how nice you think they are or they think they are. It's not some sort of metaphor. It's a literal phrase. Why would it be a metaphor when it would just be a completely different phrase? All cops are bastards. That is a fact. There's no metaphor here. They're just trying to do mental gymnastics, as I said. It doesn't make any sense. And there's no point responding to them any further. I already explained it. And that is for the benefit of people who aren't these people, who might be asking these, like new to these ideas completely, who might be asking these questions legitimately. Not to the people in this actual thread, because they are not. They need to maintain the aesthetic of them performatively using the phrase ACAB, all cops are bastards, when they don't actually believe in that one bit, when it comes down to it, as they're making very clear here. Because, it's hip and cool aesthetically to say all cops are bastards. But when it comes down to it, they don't actually believe that. And they need to somehow rationalize that disconnect in the way that they present themselves and what they actually advocate for, what they actually do believe, So there's no point arguing with it. There you go. It's done.